work in a text. I think I did some of that briefly a while back, if memory serves. We could go back and check the tapes. But does that make sense to you? You're looking. So
no, I'm agreeing.
I'm never in a hurry to decide. In fact, I really don't care what works mean. I'm not interested in meaning. As a literary critic, my general attitude is the problem is that there's too much meaning.
Exactly.
Okay, so what we want to do is we want to kind of shift our perspective in a different way. When we were looking at,
so this is where we're looking at bigger questions, the questions we're asking in the course, and looking at those questions in relation to the novel, rather than analysing what the novel means. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. Here's my general hunch. I think if we take the kinds of conversations that we were having before we started reading the novel, and say, okay, let's think about those questions that we were raising and the possible answers or partial answers that we were coming up with. Let's take that conversation and see if we interrogate the novel, if the novel confirms the kinds of things that we were saying. Is it in sync with the hunches that we were having? Or is the novel giving us an opportunity to factor in elements of the problem that we hadn't considered before? So rather than trying to think that the novel will give us an answer to this question, can we create a machine that will be conscious in the same way that a human being is, or in a way that is sort of like the way in which human beings are conscious? Maybe what the novel helps to do is understand why that way of formulating the question is so fundamentally erroneous. Right? Does that make some sense? I'm not sure. I've been up for a very long time. I'm not sure I'm communicating. You guys look pretty tired too. So I'm not sure if I'm talking to a neural net or to people. But if anyone want to respond to what I'm saying here before, or do you want to run with this?
Right. What exactly is the question that we're erroneously forming?
I think there are lots of different versions of it, aren't there?
Yeah, I mean, you're all looking at questions, different questions in your projects. And
they're all related in some
they're all related to this idea of what does it mean to be human, what is consciousness, and there's no way we can deal with transhumanism without that understanding. And the answer to what is transhumanism is what is consciousness. Once we know that, we know what is human, what is humanism, what does it mean to be human, then we understand all these things that we're doing that are changing that for us in our modern society.
Would any of us dispute the statement that the technology that we invent and create and sustain and allow to saturate our day-to-day lives, like things like our iPhones and our laptops, that technology is altering our experience, not the definition here, but it's altering our experience of who it is that we are. You hold that thought, Tom?
Yeah, I feel so the book is a distraction.
I lost it. What's a distraction?
This.
Okay, so that technology is.
But that wasn't the question he asked.
Well,
it was,
you said this deviates from who we are, and I feel
does it alter? Does it alter your experience of who you are?
It changes who we think we are. We are. Well, when I say
what's the difference
for my generation, we are like. I feel sorry for the kids nowadays. They give me cell phones at age 6 and 7.
Could I just stop you there? Just something you said there. I said, does it change who you are? And you answered, no, it changes who we think we are. What's the difference between those two?
Well,
you might think you've undergone a change, but maybe you haven't there.
If I was Amish, if I was like somebody who didn't believe in lights and electricity, I may have I may say my life is humble, and I may do everybody else as that's not what humanity is. We're stewards of the earth or something like that. As far as we know, we don't have a purpose of what we do, so we make things like technology to make things convenient, put purposes and definitions.
But what I deliberately asked the question to try to avoid that trap. Okay, does our technology, right, alter the experience that we have of ourselves. Not our essence, not our nature, right? Not what I think I am, right? Is that a better or a worse way to formulate the question? So, did the invention of the pen, the pencil, the stylus, right? Did that alter the experience of what it means to be human? Does an iPhone? See, when Stellar grafts an ear onto his arm, and if it all kind of catches on, we all want an ear on our arm, right? Would that alter our experience? Not the definition of what we are, but the experience that we have of ourselves.
I would say, yeah. Something like, you know, the invention of the ballpoint pen, or some writing utensil. I mean, I'm just talking about writing utensils, for an example. Before, we could only, prior to that, you know, if we were expressing an idea or whatever, we can only do so verbally, and that's very limited. If you give something like a writing utensil, now you can draw diagrams, you can write, you can make some sort of language. That's an added dimension.
How does that change the experience of yourself?
What is
of ourselves?
Yeah,
then,
that's the question. It's a difficult one.
Can you come back to me on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is just, see, my own hunch here is that in popular culture, we're going to always spin our wheels, okay, with these questions about transhumanism and the post-human and all of that. But when we set aside the kind of popular blogging kind of discourse, and we actually read somebody like Catherine Hales, right? Think about there's a different level, there's a different order of engagement with the question, okay? So there are all kinds of traps out there, and if we step into a trap, it's like getting into a box. You just keep finding that, you know, it's a big box, and you don't realize that you're in one corner until you've been back there 3 or 4 times. But eventually you say, hey, I know this place, I've been here before. So the question is, because in a class like this at a university, what we want to do is we want to see if we can identify where those kinds of traps are. Where are we asking a badly formulated question versus where are we asking a more productive question? And what that means is we'll just have to find out by trying. So, Phil, we'll just bring in some other people here.
So the experience is a weird word because I'm not really sure.
You're not sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think, to me,
Have you ever, go ahead, sorry.
oh, well, my first thought was, and so take technology, we go back to a handwriting on parchment, it makes the experience of being me more expansive to a certain degree, places me in a context of a larger world, the human species, because I can, even, I don't know, a few hundred years ago when all there was handwriting on parchment, I could read words of someone who existed 100 years before me, so those ideas are transmitted down, and almost like, yeah, it makes culture more expansive, more, I don't know if concrete's the right word, more
Do
of
you have
a...
any memories of what it was like when you first started to write? Do you have any memory about learning how to...
Yeah, I remember learning to write.
What did that do for you? Did it change the experience you had of yourself?
No, it was a physical thing about forming the letters. I remember it not changing me. I remember it being a physical thing about writing letters.
Did you have like graph paper for the capital letters you had to go up to?
See, I'm learning that learning how to write did sort of change what I was, because I was taught how to write incorrectly by nuns at Catholic school, so I had to be retaught how to write at home.
What do you mean, like
You couldn't just say you
No,
you learned something from Catholic school.
So it was constant double talk from different parties, my parents, and these nuns trying to teach me, you know, this is how you work pencil, this is how you write this way, and just this constant frustration and anger at both parties because I just wanted to make words.
They taught you how to hold the pen improperly?
Yes.
Okay. There are different styles for how to hold the pen.
Someone who went to Catholic school, yeah, I Feel your pain.
So, is it fair to say that like an experience of me could come from someone else, like someone, like if I had written something and someone else that I didn't know, for example, commented to me about something that I had written. Is that an experience of myself?
Not following your example yet. Try it one more time.
Right. Well, okay. So I guess if we're going by it's the invention of writing or like written language or something like that as a technology, then I'm more likely to have recorded something that someone else can then, like someone that I've never met before might read and then comment to me about it, and then I'm having an experience of myself that I wouldn't have had if I didn't know how to write. Does that make any sense?
It does a little. I'm getting there, but I mean, let's take technology out of the equation. We're just having trouble understanding this notion of. Has anything ever happened to you that changed your experience of yourself?
I would say that because of what an iPhone can do, it can have an impact with you because it's a tool for connectivity, and I feel like connectivity as a whole is a big influencer on your own sense of self. And because it's almost like, if you think of how the way you act when you're in a room by yourself and how you would act in a room full of people, it's almost that with Facebook literally in your pocket, you never leave the room full of people. You know, so you take that with you with your other interactions, knowing that it almost never stops. So I think it definitely affects your sense of self.
So you're catching on. You think there's some sense in the kind of way I'm formulating the question.
Yeah, it's not so much the physicality, but what it does. And how the
But I don't care to define what an iPhone is, but I care to figure out how having an iPhone in my world changes my experience.
But I think John's point was very similar about the idea of writing, a form of communication and feedback that changes ourselves as well, even with a pen or...
It acts on me.
Yes.
That was I guess I wasn't following.
He was asking the question.
I think I was having a different definition of like the experience of myself. Like maybe I was misunderstanding how you meant that, but I took it to mean like sort of like I guess looking in a mirror, for example, like someone else commenting to me about my writing is in some sense like looking into a mirror, because it's like seeing myself but not actually looking at myself.
So you get a paper all marked up from a professor.
Yeah, sure.
It's your writing, and then there's this other writing on it, and the other writing kind of mixes in with your writing.
Well, because it's about my writing, so it's like a reflect. It's like
if a teacher fixes a sentence on your paper, is it your sentence still?
Not entirely, I guess.
Or has that encounter somehow altered your experience of yourself as a writer?
Well, it's probably made me realize that I'm not as good a writer as I thought when I wrote it.
or is the teacher finding the sentence that you're trying, it's really your sentence in some way, but you didn't have access to it until the teacher fixed it. And you say, oh yeah, that's my sentence.
Well, ideally, unless the teacher didn't understand what I was saying.
Or you disagree with the way the teacher has changed the sentence.
Yeah, you say that's all wrong.
My sentence is better. So.
Yeah.
That reminds me of something that one of the things that they often say about people that sort of feel lost with their lives or whatever, they don't know what they want to do, is to keep a journal. And that just sort of makes me think of, they say, the more you write in a journal, like you're really just having a conversation with yourself. And
is that changing your experience?
Yes, because now something that is stream of consciousness, that thoughts that are just sort of stream of consciousness, you put them on paper. Now they're a little more permanent. And when you come back to them, you ask, like you were asking before, if a teacher corrects a sentence, is that still your sentence? If you go back and if you write something, and then you go back days, months, years later, and you read it again, are those still your words? Are you the same person that wrote those words back then?
Yes and no.
Yes.
So I guess my view on this doesn't really do with my experience, but more what other people do that affect my experience.
Oh, tell me more.
So I always use the example, or I've heard the example 9/11. Flying pre 9/11 is completely different. You have a different experience then versus flying after. Or you can do anything, right? Like pre-timeline on Facebook is completely different than post-timeline on Facebook, right? So my experience, even though I never flew, well, pre 9/11, or if you didn't have Facebook pre-timeline, you still you still can think about that experience before, and you kind of, I guess, nostalgia, hindsight's 20/20. So I guess yes.
You kind of imagine what it must have been like.
Yeah.
Before timeline on Facebook.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Or imagining the hardships your parents had to go through when they didn't have mobile phones.
Exactly.
I remember just waiting for the rotary dial to return so I could dial the next number. It took forever. If it was a 9, it took forever.
Has anyone got the rotary dial application on their mobile phone? There's lots of free ones, you can download them, and you can turn your mobile to have rotary dial, there's many different ones. It's worth doing just for a couple of days to see what your parents had to do.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about more exactly defining things in this class. So
Defining versus describing, yeah. Defining.
So could you maybe more concretely define the experience of ourselves? I don't know what you mean. Like, is that just how we perceive ourselves versus something about how we actually are?
Well, I think it involves, rather than trying to narrow it down too much, I just think, well, I think differently about myself now because I've had this experience. Or I understand myself differently, or I'll never be the same again because. Something like, just see if you can plug it into that. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, so rather than trying to define it, and then not get to kind of even have any access to the problem.
But that opens up the question of, take for example an iPhone or new technology comes into our lives. I think differently about myself. What if I don't notice the change? There's a self-reflexive part that we may change. We may have this fantastic new ability, but we don't even process that, really. We just flow along with it.
We might not realize it for a long time.
Yeah, that's all.
Or we might notice it instantly and think it's a big deal, only to discover that nothing much has changed. So I'd be open to all those possibilities.
As someone who deals with technology all the time, I find myself looking back and thinking, wow, a few years ago I couldn't do this. It's not that I suddenly thought I have changed. It's with, as Brian said, with hindsight, looking back to a time, you think, I couldn't do this a few years ago.
Have you had the experience where you have a very familiar technology and then you learn, let's say you've been working with some version of Word, and then you discover, oh my gosh, I've had this technology in front of me, and it could have solved this practical problem that I have. I just didn't think about applying it in this particular way. Right?
Yeah.
So I have that experience a lot. I'll have like a research problem, or I'll have some kind of problem where I've got a lot of data and I have to kind of organize it in some way. And I don't realize that I have this very efficient tool called my desktop computer, or my laptop, or the way they're networked. And I'll say, oh my God, I could make this, like my life could be much easier.
Yeah.
But I might go 7 or 10 or 12 years before I realize that this technology that I've had is one that will really alter my experience of just the work of doing research. So maybe something along those lines.
I was going to say Philip was next.
Who was next?
We
Lost track
Sandra
of
first, so-
how it was working.
I guess I have a question, because so right now I'm not seeing a difference between changing my experience of myself and changing myself. That's what, I guess I don't understand what you mean by experience.
Well, there may not be any self that you have. Let's try it that way. Okay? So your experience is different than yourself, right? Yourself isn't like an object out there. It's sort of like, a thing, right? So, but you have an experience of yourself, even if you don't know what yourself is. That could be English.
You might have to draw this one on the board.
I'm happy that you drew this. This is going to be very helpful.
I'm sorry, but isn't the fact that we can't find a definition for experience is because we have many barriers to experiences. Like, we all relate to one another similarly, we all have differences. At the same time, I feel as though we all share, like, the beginning of time, like, experience is a result of the human condition.
Let me turn this back, okay?
Yeah.
We've got this book, okay? And what's happening in this book? We've got a narrator and a writer. And the narrator is basically saying, here's the story of my 35th year. I was lost at the beginning. We get through the book, I was found. So at the end there, right, it's that sense, there's some statements that are made. Connectionism has to eat crow, right? We owe the enemy of one public retraction. There's been something that's changed in the course of narrating the story here, right? So Powers is writing a novel about this character, Rick Powers is narrating this story, and the narrative itself is registering a change in experience.
When you ask whether technology alters our experiences, like, I feel as though, all right, today we have a global perspective of our life. Like, everything is interconnected, either, through internet, through whatever. Back then, I didn't see people waiting online for signals and clouds. Nowadays, you wait online for sneakers and iPhones. And it's like, it's just the way that it changes people's, I don't know, the whole consumerist, materialistic, capitalistic, globalization of the world has changed our experience. Not solely technology.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I was just zeroing in on, do technologies, right, change or alter our experience of ourselves? Here's the transhumanism question, right? Are we mutating, put it into some, are we evolving because as a species, because we've invented these technologies? Will it be conceivably the case that you and I, as members of our species, will not be able to survive unless we become more and more highly technological, unless we start to bring that technology into our bodies?
The way I'm seeing this is that's the question we ask at the start of this course, and what you've been doing in this class is taking that question back into a way we can think about it more deeply and logically, rather than talking around in one. Just saying, do the technologies make us evolve? Is one of those general questions.
Right,
it's going to put you in that box. I can see that. Yeah. Whereas this more fundamental questions of it altering the sense of ourselves or our experience of ourselves lets us think about what those technologies are actually doing. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think you're catching.
Did everyone get that?
Does that make some sense? See, because in a way, that's what I think is happening in the novel. I think Richard Powers is this really bright novelist who's got a lot of experience as a computer science type person, programmer and so on. And so he's a person who's trained in the sciences, the natural sciences, computer science, and the humanities. And he's using the novel to think about this question. How did this experience that I had with this neural net, and with the people who were involved in the process of bringing the neural net about, right? How did that experience alter who it was that I was when I started the project in that 35th year? When I found myself midway in life, lost in the dark wood. I had to get down to the middle one more time.
I've got one more quick announcement before we finish.
Okay.
I've been asked by MOST, which is the Museum of Science and Technology in Syracuse, to potentially do some exhibits and some demos with the robots. Now these are going to be, at the moment they're talking about quick things where we turn up for an afternoon and show the robots dancing, for kids. They're very keen on robots at the moment. They're having some big robot demos. They're going to have the Da Vinci robot surgical simulator in there. So I know you'll want to come down and say, Tatiana does some work on robot surgery stuff. So hopefully some of us will go down and see that when they have that demo. But I'm going to propose to them that one of the things we could do is develop some kind of exhibit for them that talks to children a little more deeply about these issues. through the medium of robots and online kind of demos. So if anyone's interested in that kind of project, you know, developing something for children with robots, and I'm very interested in getting kids to think a little bit more deeply about what the robots are. Are they human? Are they not human? Get kids to think about the stuff we're talking about. I don't expect them to read Heidegger, but you know, we could get them to think about some of these rather than just doing something fun, getting some of these concepts in.
Do you have a practical example of the kind of thing that you've done with? You were working on the health issues.
Yeah, health issues with kids, but
sort of extending that.
literally, I only got an email yesterday, so I haven't talked back to them, but I'm going to propose that this is something maybe we should do. So anyone who's interested, I'll talk to you more about this. I'll post some stuff up. Okay.